A rich mindset under pressure is not how confident you sound when money is good. It is how little access fear has to your hands when money gets tight. That is where most men expose themselves. Not because they are poor, but because scarcity makes them negotiate against themselves. They spend to look unaffected. They explain to feel supported. They rush decisions just to escape the shame of uncertainty. Then they call it survival. No, it is emotional debt disguised as pressure. Machiavelli understood that men are ruled by immediate needs when they lack command. Under financial stress, your first enemy is not the bill, the doubt, or the people watching you struggle. It is the impulse trying to make one weak move feel like relief. But control is not numbness. It is protocol. Before you spend, speak, quit, argue, or chase approval, you learn to govern the man inside you who panics first. Because pressure does not ask if you are ready. It tests you through small moments, the unnecessary purchase, the bad deal, the message you should not send, the job you want to quit too early, the hard conversation you keep avoiding, the need to prove that you are fine when your bank account says you are exposed. Most men think financial pressure reveals their money problem. It does not. It reveals their command problem. Money only gives the pressure a visible shape. The real issue is the man underneath it. The man who becomes loud when he feels small. The man who spends when he feels unseen. The man who accepts less because uncertainty humiliates him. The man who explains his ambition to people who have no power to fund it, build it, protect it, or understand it. The man who mistakes emotional motion for strategic movement. This is why two men can face the same pressure and become completely different people. One man gets a bill and loses his mind. He starts checking messages, looking for sympathy, blaming people, browsing things he cannot afford, imagining how everyone will judge him and making decisions just to stop feeling cornered. Another man gets the same bill and becomes colder. He writes the numbers. He separates the urgent from the dramatic. He identifies the leak. He decides what can wait, what must be paid, what must be cut, what must be negotiated, what skill must be built, and what weak behavior has to die. The bill is the same. The pressure is the same. The difference is command. And this is the first law. Law 1: never make financial decisions while emotionally exposed. The most dangerous financial decision is not always the biggest one. It is the one made when you are emotionally naked. Fear makes you want speed. Shame makes you want concealment. Loneliness makes you want validation. Status anxiety makes you want to look unaffected. Together, they create the perfect condition for a weak move. This is how a man buys something he does not need because he cannot stand looking behind. This is how he accepts a bad deal because the silence between opportunity and certainty feels unbearable. This is how he quits too early because being a beginner makes him feel exposed. This is how he avoids the hard conversation about money, debt, payment, salary, partnership, or expectations, because he would rather suffer quietly than risk hearing the truth out loud. He tells himself he is being practical. He is not. He is being governed by emotion with a business mask on. A man under pressure must understand this clearly. When fear is high, your ability to calculate is lower than you think. You may still sound rational. You may still use intelligent words. You may still tell yourself there is no choice. But much of what you call choice is often just the nervous system trying to escape discomfort. That is why scarcity makes men negotiate against themselves. They lower their price before the other person even asks. They apologize before they have done anything wrong. They reveal too much because they want the other person to understand their pain. They accept disrespect because they fear losing the little option they have. They make promises from panic and then live under those promises like prisoners. This is not poverty. This is exposure. The first rule is simple. Do not decide while emotionally exposed. Not because decisions can wait forever, they cannot. Not because pressure is fake, it is real. But because your first emotional reaction is usually designed for relief, not power. Relief asks, how do I make this feeling stop? Power asks, what move gives me more control after this moment passes? Those are not the same question. If you are financially pressured and you feel the urge to spend, stop. If you feel the urge to announce a desperate plan, stop. If you feel the urge to argue with someone just to discharge pressure, stop. If you feel the urge to quit, stop. If you feel the urge to accept the first offer because it gives you certainty, stop. Not forever. Long enough to return to command, because the man who cannot pause cannot govern. And the man who cannot govern himself under pressure will eventually be governed by anyone who knows how to apply pressure. This is where Machiavelli becomes useful. He did not write for men living in fantasy. He studied power among people driven by fear, hunger, ambition, insecurity, betrayal, and necessity. He understood that immediate need makes men predictable. And the predictable man is easy to price, easy to corner, easy to flatter, easy to frighten, and easy to use. It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both. That line is not permission to become cruel. It is a warning about dependence. If your survival depends on being liked, approved, understood, or emotionally rescued, then under pressure you will trade power for acceptance. You will say yes when you should wait. You will explain when you should observe. You will discount yourself when you should negotiate. You will move first because silence feels like rejection. And in the real world, people do not always exploit your weakness because they are evil. Sometimes they exploit it because your weakness makes the transaction easier. That is why self-command is not a luxury. It is protection. Law 2. Separate pain from instruction. Pain speaks loudly. That is why weak men mistake it for wisdom. When you are unsupported, pain becomes especially dangerous because you have fewer voices around you that can slow you down. You do not have a calm father who understands the road. You do not have a mentor watching your decisions. You do not have friends who know how to separate ambition from delusion. You may not have a financial safety net. You may not have anyone coming to bail you out. So when pain arrives, it feels like authority. Your shame says, buy something so you do not look poor. Your loneliness says, explain yourself so someone finally understands. Your fear says, take the deal before it disappears. Your anger says, send the message now. Your exhaustion says, quit before this breaks you. Your insecurity says, prove to them you are doing better than they think. But pain is not always instruction. Pain is data. Data must be read. It must not be obeyed blindly. There is a difference between a wound and a command. A wound tells you something hurts. A command tells you what to do. Most men collapse the two. They feel pain, then immediately act as if the feeling came with orders attached. This is how a man turns one hard week into a permanent identity. He feels rejected, so he decides nobody respects him. He feels broke, so he decides he is trapped. He feels unsupported, so he decides the world is against him. He feels tired, so he decides his discipline is fake. He feels embarrassed, so he decides he must perform confidence. Pain may contain intelligence, but it also contains distortion. If a bill creates fear, the instruction is not panic. The instruction may be to audit spending. If a rejection creates shame, the instruction is not to disappear. The instruction may be to improve the offer. If family doubt creates anger, the instruction is not to explain harder. The instruction may be to stop seeking belief before proof. If loneliness creates desperation, the instruction is not to chase approval. The instruction may be to build structure around your solitude. The disciplined man does not deny pain. He interrogates it. He asks, "What is this feeling trying to make me do?" Then he asks the colder question, "Would that action increase my power or only reduce my discomfort?" That question alone can save a man years. Because many of your worst moves were not made because you lacked intelligence. They were made because you wanted the feeling to stop. You wanted the shame to stop. You wanted the uncertainty to stop. You wanted the silence to stop. You wanted the gap between your private ambition and public proof to stop humiliating you. So you moved, you spoke, you bought, you quit, you chased, you explained, you accepted. And for a moment, you felt relief. Then the bill remained. The debt remained. The weak offer remained. The lack of skill remained. The lack of skill remained. The lack of leverage remained. The lack of proof remained. That is the cruelty of emotional decisions. They give you a small payment now and charge interest later. This is why I call it emotional debt. Financial debt takes money from your future. Emotional debt takes command from your future. Every time you obey panic, you teach your future self that pressure has authority. Every time you obey shame, you teach your future self that image is more important than substance. Every time you obey loneliness, you teach your future self that approval is a survival tool. And eventually, you do not just have financial pressure. You have a personality built around escape. This is the moment where the unsupported man must become colder, not harder. Hardness without intelligence becomes bitterness. Coldness with discipline becomes power. If you are the kind of man building without support, stop mistaking consumption for progress. You already know watching more content is not the problem. Your problem is that pressure still reaches your hands before discipline reaches your behavior. If you keep collecting insight without building command, you will become a man with sharp language and weak execution. Inside Patreon, I give exclusive, unfiltered breakdowns on self-command, leverage, masculine discipline, power, and strategic behavior, so you can turn pressure into structure instead of another emotional cycle. This is not for men looking for comfort. It is for men who want to be tested by truth before life tests them harder. The decision is yours. Law 3. Build a pressure protocol. A man without protocol becomes a slave to his strongest mood. This is why advice like "stay calm" is weak. Calm is not a command. Calm is the result of a system that stops panic from taking the throne. When money gets tight, you need rules that activate before emotion takes over, not after. After is too late. After the argument, after the purchase, after the desperate message, after the impulsive promise, after the bad agreement, after the shame decision, you will always have an explanation. But explanations do not refund power. So build the protocol before pressure arrives. Here is the rule. When financially stressed, do not spend, announce, argue, quit, or decide for 24 hours. Not because every situation can wait. Some cannot. But most emotional decisions pretend to be emergencies because your nervous system wants urgency. Urgency feels productive. It gives panic a costume. It says, do something now or you will lose control. But often, doing something now is exactly how you lose control. The first move is not action. The first move is numbers. Write the numbers, not the story, not the fear, not the resentment, not the imagined judgment of other people. The numbers. What came in, what must go out, what is due now, what can wait, what can be negotiated, what can be reduced, what is unnecessary, what is leaking. What decision are you avoiding because the truth would embarrass you? Numbers are humiliating at first because they remove fantasy, but that is why they are powerful. They force the mind to stop dramatizing and start governing. A man can survive a hard number. He cannot survive a vague terror he refuses to measure. The second move is to identify the leak. The leak may be spending. It may be poor negotiation. It may be low income. It may be unstable work. It may be lack of skill. It may be lack of visibility. It may be debt. It may be emotional spending. It may be friends, habits, subscriptions, food delivery, status purchases, or small repeated escapes that seem harmless because each one is not dramatic alone. A leak does not need to be impressive to destroy you. It only needs to be consistent. Many men are not ruined by one giant failure. They are drained by repeated small permissions. A little comfort here, a little avoidance there, a little ego purchase, a little delay, a little refusal to look at the account, a little silence instead of negotiation, a little pride instead of asking the direct question. Then they wake up and call life unfair. Life may be unfair, but unfairness is not a strategy. You still need command. The third move is to choose the next controlled action, not the perfect action, not the heroic action, not the action that makes you feel like a new man for one evening. The next controlled action. Send the invoice, cut the expense, make the call, renegotiate the payment date, apply to the better role, build the offer, practice the sales conversation, track the spending, finish the project, ask for the terms, decline the purchase, sleep instead of spiraling. Wake up and execute the first task before checking whether the world cares. This is how pressure becomes smaller. Not because the world becomes gentle, because your behavior stops adding chaos to the original problem. You cannot always control the bill, but you can control whether the bill turns you into a desperate negotiator. You cannot always control doubt, but you can control whether doubt makes you explain yourself to people who are not qualified to judge the road. You cannot always control a low month, but you can control whether a low month becomes an identity. You cannot always control being unsupported, but you can control whether lack of support becomes an excuse for lack of structure. This is where most men fail. They do not lack ambition. They lack a protocol for the hours when ambition feels useless. They can talk about vision when rested. They can speak about dominance when comfortable. They can post about discipline when life is stable. But when the account gets low, when the family doubt gets loud, when the friend group becomes quiet, when the opportunity is uncertain, when the work feels invisible, the old identity returns. The boy who wants reassurance. The performer who wants to look unaffected. The wounded man who wants someone to notice. The desperate worker who accepts less because something feels better than nothing. The quitter who disguises fear as clarity. That is why pressure protocol is not a productivity trick. It is identity defense. Law 4, use scarcity as a drill, not an identity. Scarcity should sharpen behavior. It should not become your name. There is a dangerous moment when a man stops saying, "I am experiencing pressure," and starts saying, "This is who I am. I am broke, I am behind, I am unsupported, I am unlucky, I am invisible, I am trapped." At first, it sounds honest, but repeated long enough, it becomes a throne for weakness. You must be precise with language because identity listens. If you say, "I am broke," the mind looks for proof that broke is your nature. If you say, "I am under financial pressure and I need a better system," the mind looks for moves. One statement creates identity. The other creates instruction. This distinction matters because scarcity changes the price of mistakes. A man with support can afford a few stupid decisions. He can move back home. He can borrow from family. He can recover through a network. He can get introduced to someone. He can fail publicly and still be protected privately. But the unsupported man does not have that luxury. Nobody is coming to soften every mistake. Nobody is waiting with a safety net every time pride gets expensive. Nobody is obligated to understand the emotional reasons behind your bad financial behavior. That may sound harsh. Good. It should. Because if fewer mistakes are affordable, then systems matter more. Scarcity is not proof that you are inferior. It is proof that you need tighter command. You need fewer leaks, fewer emotional purchases, fewer announcements, fewer promises made from pressure, fewer distractions disguised as recovery, fewer nights lost to numbness because the day made you feel small. Use scarcity as a drill. A drill is not an identity. A drill trains behavior under constraint. It teaches you what breaks first. It reveals where your system is weak. It shows whether you can follow rules when feelings are loud. It exposes the habits that only look disciplined when life was easy. If money is tight, the question is not, why is this happening to me? The stronger question is, what is this pressure trying to expose? Is it exposing that your income depends on one source? Is it exposing that you do not know how to sell? Is it exposing that you avoid negotiation? Is it exposing that you spend to regulate shame? Is it exposing that you have no emergency margin? Is it exposing that your skill is not scarce enough? Is it exposing that your reputation has not created leverage? Is it exposing that you have been busy but not building assets? This is the cold value of scarcity. It removes your excuses by making the weak points visible, but only if you refuse to worship the pain. Some men become addicted to the story of struggle. They begin to use pressure as proof of depth. They think suffering makes them serious. It does not. Suffering only becomes useful when converted into behavior, skill, structure, proof, and leverage. Pain without conversion becomes resentment. Scarcity without discipline becomes identity. Pressure without protocol becomes self-sabotage. And this is where the next danger appears. Once a man feels invisible, unsupported, and financially exposed, he faces one of the most expensive temptations of his life, the temptation to buy the appearance of power before he has built the substance. Law 5. Kill status spending. The fake rich trap does not begin with luxury. It begins with injury. A man feels invisible. He feels behind. He feels like the world has not received the memo about who he believes he is becoming. His family still sees the old version. His friends still measure him by his current results. Society does not reward private potential. His bank account does not match the identity he carries inside. So he starts looking for signals. A better watch, better shoes, a more expensive night out, a lifestyle image he cannot sustain, a purchase that says, "I am not as weak as this season makes me look," a display that says, "Do not mistake my current pressure for my final rank." But the market does not care what you are trying to signal. Interest does not care about your insecurity. Debt does not care that you felt unseen. An empty account does not care that you needed one moment of status relief. Status spending is the poor man's attempt to purchase temporary dignity, and that is why it is so dangerous. It does not feel like weakness while you are doing it. It feels like self-respect. It feels like refusing to look defeated. It feels like controlling perception. It feels like telling the world that you are still in the game. But if the purchase weakens your future options, it was not self-respect. It was surrender with a better outfit. The unsupported man must understand this with absolute clarity. There is a difference between presentation and performance. Presentation can help you when it is used strategically. Clean clothes, professional appearance, controlled speech, physical discipline, and a calm presence can increase trust. That is not the problem. The problem begins when you buy the image of a man whose systems you have not built. You buy the surface before the foundation. You buy the signal before the substance. You buy the appearance of options while reducing your actual options. That is not power. Power is not looking rich while being fragile. Power is having enough control that you do not need every stranger, friend, woman, relative, co-worker or follower to believe you are doing well. Power is the ability to say no. Power is the ability to wait. Power is the ability to leave a bad deal. Power is the ability to survive a slow month without becoming desperate. Power is the ability to make a calm decision while your old identity is begging for applause. Status spending steals that power from you quietly. It takes the money that could have become margin. It takes the margin that could have become patience. It takes the patience that could have become negotiation strength. It takes the negotiation strength that could have become better income, better terms, better choices, and a cleaner exit from weak positions. One unnecessary purchase is rarely the issue. The issue is the emotional pattern underneath it. A man feels small, so he buys height. He feels invisible, so he buys attention. He feels doubted, so he buys a costume of success. He feels behind, so he buys something that makes him look current. He feels ashamed of the gap between his ambition and his proof, so he tries to cover the gap with consumption. But the gap cannot be covered. It has to be closed. And you close it through skill, output, proof, reputation, savings, leverage, and repeated controlled action. The world does not respect your fantasy. It responds to evidence. This is where many ambitious men become dangerous to themselves. They are not lazy. They are not stupid. They are not without vision. They simply cannot endure the humiliation of being early. Being early is psychologically brutal. You are working, but the work has not become proof yet. You are learning, but the skill has not become income yet. You are sacrificing, but nobody sees the sacrifice. You are trying to become serious, but the people around you still remember the unserious version. You are building an identity that the world has not confirmed. That gap creates pressure. And if you cannot tolerate that pressure, you will try to buy a premature identity. This is why status spending must die. Not because money is evil, not because style is evil, not because wanting to look sharp is weakness, but because a man under pressure must know which purchases increase leverage and which purchases only sedate shame. Ask yourself before you spend, does this increase my earning ability? Does this protect my health? Does this improve my skill? Does this strengthen my reputation in a real environment? Does this help me produce, sell, learn, recover, negotiate, or operate better? Or does this only help me feel less embarrassed for a few hours? That final question will expose you. Most men do not need a stricter budget first. They need a more honest mirror. Because the hidden wound is not that they want the item. The hidden wound is that they want the item to say something about them that their results have not said yet. They want the purchase to speak because their proof is still quiet. But the man who is becoming dangerous does not let consumption speak for him. He lets restraint speak first. He lets skill speak later. He lets results speak last. When you kill status spending, you are not choosing to look weak. You are choosing to stop paying for illusions. You are choosing margin over performance. You are choosing ownership over applause. You are choosing future leverage over present validation. You are choosing to become the kind of man who does not need to look unaffected because he is no longer controlled by being seen as affected. That is a different level of command. But after you stop wasting money to manage shame, a harder question appears. What do you do with the pressure that remains? Because cutting expenses is not enough. Restraining yourself is not enough. Surviving a hard month is not enough. If the same pressure keeps returning, then the pressure is asking for something deeper. It is asking for a skill. Law 6. Turn every pressure into a skill demand. Every recurring pressure in your life is making a demand. Most men hear pressure emotionally. The disciplined man hears it strategically. Debt is not only saying, "I hurt." It may be saying, "Learn budgeting, learn income control, learn negotiation, learn patience, learn restraint." Low income is not only saying, "Life is unfair." It may be saying, "Your skill is not scarce enough, your offer is not clear enough, your value is not visible enough, your negotiation is too weak, your market does not know you exist." Being ignored is not only saying, "Nobody respects me." It may be saying, "Create proof, distribute your work, improve your communication, become harder to replace." A bad job is not only saying, "Leave." It may be saying, "Build an exit skill before you turn frustration into a reckless decision." Financial stress becomes useful only when it is translated into a skill demand. This translation separates the emotional man from the strategic man. The emotional man says, "I am tired of this." The strategic man says, "What capability would make this pressure less powerful next year?" That question is brutal because it removes the pleasure of complaint. If your pressure is income, the skill demand may be sales, offer creation, negotiation, writing, coding, content management, client acquisition, public proof, or a higher value, technical ability. If your pressure is debt, the skill demand may be budgeting, restraint, tracking, repayment strategy, income expansion, and the ability to stop using money as emotional anesthesia. If your pressure is discipline, the skill demand may be environment design, sleep control, focused work, repetition, and learning how to execute without emotional reward. If your pressure is investing, the skill demand may be patience, risk control, financial literacy, pattern recognition, and the humility to not gamble while calling it strategy. If your pressure is ownership, the skill demand may be learning how to build assets, document value, create systems, hire, sell, distribute, and keep control over what you produce. Pressure is not always a punishment. Sometimes it is a report card. It shows you where your current identity has reached its limit. A man who cannot sell will feel trapped by employers. A man who cannot negotiate will accept terms written by stronger hands. A man who cannot write clearly will struggle to make his value visible. A man who cannot manage himself will call every opportunity overwhelming. A man who cannot budget will turn every income increase into a larger lifestyle trap. A man who cannot create proof will keep asking people to believe in potential. And potential without proof is a private religion. You may believe in it. The world does not have to. This is why the unsupported man must stop asking, "Who believes in me?" A better question is, what skill would make belief unnecessary? That question changes everything. If you become useful enough, some doors open without emotional explanation. If you become skilled enough, certain doubts become irrelevant. If you become visible enough, people who ignored you start recalculating. If you build enough proof, you do not need to argue with every person who remembers your weaker season. This does not mean everyone will support you. This does not mean life becomes fair. This does not mean skill solves every structural problem. But it gives you leverage, and leverage is the language reality respects more than emotion. Machiavelli understood that men respond to power more reliably than they respond to virtue. In modern life, one form of power is undeniable usefulness. Another is financial margin. Another is reputation. Another is an owned audience. Another is a rare skill. Another is the ability to walk away. Without these, you can be a good man and still be cornered. That is the part most motivational content avoids. It tells you to believe in yourself, but belief without leverage still has to accept bad terms. Belief without skill still gets underpaid. Belief without proof still gets dismissed. Belief without savings still gets frightened by every emergency. Self-command must turn into capability. Otherwise, it becomes philosophy with no teeth. When pressure comes, do not only ask how to feel better, ask what permanent weakness this pressure is exposing. If a client rejects you, what must improve? The offer, the proof, the positioning, the sales conversation, the market, or the quality of the work? If your job underpays you, what must improve? Your negotiation, your alternatives, your skill scarcity, your visibility, or your ability to leave? If you keep running out of money, what must improve? Your income, your tracking, your habits, your restraint, your spending psychology, or your relationship with status? If you keep losing discipline, what must improve? Your environment, your sleep, your schedule, your emotional regulation, your standards, or your addiction to short relief? Pressure is a messenger. But weak men shoot the messenger by numbing themselves. They scroll, they spend, they complain, they sleep too late, they talk about being misunderstood, they fantasize about proving everyone wrong, they watch another video, they collect another idea, they call it preparation. But nothing changes because the skill demand was never answered. The world does not owe you a softer test because you had less support. In fact, no support means you must become more exact, more structured, more honest, more careful with your energy, more selective with your risks, more serious about what you practice. Because when nobody is coming to rescue your mistake, your systems must arrive before the rescue would have. That is why every pressure must become a training order, not an emotional episode, not a public complaint, not a private identity. A training order. If income is the pressure, train earning. If debt is the pressure, train control. If discipline is the pressure, train consistency. If investing is the pressure, train patience. If ownership is the pressure, train asset creation. If negotiation is the pressure, train asking clearly. If invisibility is the pressure, train proof and distribution. The transformation begins when you stop saying, "Why is this happening to me?" and start saying, "What capability is life demanding from me now?" That is not comfort, it is command. And once you begin answering pressure with skill, something changes in the way you carry yourself. You stop needing every hard season to end immediately. You stop treating every delay like humiliation. You stop begging the world for emotional reward every time you make the right move. You become capable of something rare. You become calm enough to compound. Law 7. Become calm enough to compound. The man who compounds money, skill, reputation, and proof is not the most excited man. He is not the man who feels motivated every morning. He is not the man whose family finally understands. He is not the man whose friends always clap. He is not the man who receives emotional reward each time he chooses discipline. He is the man who can repeat the correct action while the world gives him no evidence that it is working yet. That is why calm matters. Excitement is too expensive to depend on. Motivation is too unstable. Anger burns hot, then leaves ashes. Revenge can wake a man up, but it cannot build a clean system by itself. Shame can push him for a season, but if shame remains the engine, he will eventually sabotage the success he claimed to want. Compounding requires a colder fuel. Repetition, measurement, restraint, patience, proof. A man who compounds does not need every day to feel meaningful. He understands that meaning is often visible only after accumulation. One workout does not change the body. One sales call does not build a business. One page does not make a writer. One saved dollar does not create freedom. One disciplined day does not rebuild self-trust. One controlled reaction does not make a man sovereign. But repeated long enough, these small acts become a verdict. The world sees the result at the end and calls it confidence. But confidence was not the beginning. Confidence was the receipt. First came the decision not to panic. Then the decision not to spend for image. Then the decision not to quit from shame. Then the decision not to explain to people who could not understand. Then the decision to learn the skill. Then the decision to repeat the skill when nobody noticed. Then the decision to keep going through the boring middle where most men secretly return to their old identity. This is where pressure becomes a gate. Most men can begin. Fewer can continue without applause. Fewer still can continue when pressure increases. And almost no one can continue when they are tired, unseen, financially constrained, emotionally unsupported, and still expected to behave like a man with command. That is why calm is not passive. Calm is aggression under control. It is the refusal to let fear spend your money. It is the refusal to let shame lower your price. It is the refusal to let loneliness make you explain your vision to people who cannot help you build it. It is the refusal to let scarcity become your personality. It is the refusal to let one difficult season convince you to sell your future for relief. The calm man is not calm because life is easy. He is calm because he has decided that panic no longer gets voting power. And when panic loses voting power, compounding begins. Your money compounds when you stop destroying margin for emotional reasons. Your skill compounds when you practice even without immediate reward. Your reputation compounds when people see consistent evidence over time. Your proof compounds when you finish things, instead of constantly announcing what you plan to become. Your self-respect compounds when you keep promises so small that nobody claps for them, but so consistent that you can no longer call yourself weak. This is the real rich mindset under pressure. It is not luxury thinking. It is not pretending abundance while making fragile choices. It is not ignoring reality. It is the ability to face a hard number without becoming a smaller man. It is the ability to feel fear without giving fear access to your hands. It is the ability to be unsupported without becoming undisciplined. It is the ability to be doubted without making desperate moves for validation. It is the ability to be behind without buying fake evidence that you are ahead. It is the ability to have little and still act like a builder of something larger. That is the identity shift. You are not trying to look rich. You are learning to stop being internally cheap. Cheap with your attention, cheap with your standards, cheap with your promises, cheap with your future, cheap with your self-respect, cheap with the man you say you are becoming. A rich mindset is not proven by what you display when life is comfortable. It is proven by what you refuse to betray when life applies pressure. So remember the sequence. Never make financial decisions while emotionally exposed. Separate pain from instruction. Build a pressure protocol. Use scarcity as a drill, not an identity. Kill status spending. Turn every pressure into a skill demand. Become calm enough to compound. These are not motivational laws. They are survival laws for the man who cannot afford to be loose with himself. Because the unsupported man pays a higher price for weak behavior. When he panics, there may be no one to protect him. When he overspends, there may be no one to refill the account. When he quits too early, there may be no one to soften the fall. When he accepts a bad deal, there may be no one to negotiate for him. When he avoids the hard conversation, there may be no one to clarify the terms. When he keeps seeking approval, there may be no one honest enough to tell him that approval is the chain. So he must become his own first authority, not his own fantasy, his own authority. There is a difference. Fantasy says, I am destined. Authority says, prove it through behavior. Fantasy says, they do not understand me. Authority says, build evidence that does not require their understanding. Fantasy says, I deserve more. Authority says, become skilled enough, positioned enough and controlled enough to claim more. Fantasy says, when I feel ready, I will move. Authority says, readiness is often produced after repeated action. Fantasy says, pressure is ruining me. Authority says, pressure is revealing where I still lack command. This is the kind of man the world slowly begins to respect. Not because he begged for belief, not because he performed success, not because he shouted confidence while secretly negotiating from fear, but because his behavior became difficult to dismiss. He does not need everyone to understand the process. He needs the process to produce proof. He does not need every doubter to apologize. He needs enough leverage that their doubt no longer controls his choices. He does not need every hard season to feel fair. He needs to extract the skill demand from the pressure and obey that demand with discipline. That is what separates the man who stays trapped from the man who becomes dangerous. The trapped man uses pressure as an explanation. The dangerous man uses pressure as instruction. The trapped man spends to feel seen. The dangerous man builds until he cannot be ignored. The trapped man talks when he feels uncertain. The dangerous man writes the numbers. The trapped man quits when shame gets loud. The dangerous man pauses, audits, and chooses the next controlled action. The trapped man asks pain what to do. The dangerous man listens to pain, then checks it against strategy. That is self-command, not a mood, not a slogan, not a posture, not a personality on the internet. A private government. A system inside you that decides who gets authority when pressure arrives. If fear enters, it may speak, but it does not rule. If shame enters, it may reveal a wound, but it does not hold the pen. If anger enters, it may reveal a boundary, but it does not choose the move. If loneliness enters, it may reveal a need, but it does not send the message. If scarcity enters, it may sharpen behavior, but it does not name you. That is the rich mindset. A man becomes rich first in command, then in options, then in proof, then in leverage. Money may come at different speeds for different men, but without command, more money only gives a weak man more ways to expose himself. Give a reactive man more income, and he often creates a larger lifestyle trap. Give a status-hungry man more money, and he buys a louder costume. Give an undisciplined man more opportunity, and he converts it into chaos. Give an emotionally dependent man more attention, and he becomes addicted to applause. That is why the foundation is self-command. Because without it, every gain becomes unstable. With it, even pressure becomes material. You can turn abandonment into discipline. You can turn discipline into skill. You can turn skill into proof. You can turn proof into leverage. You can turn leverage into money, power, and freedom. But the first conversion happens in the moment nobody sees. The moment you want to panic, but write the numbers. The moment you want to buy the signal, but protect the margin. The moment you want to explain, but choose silence and output. The moment you want to quit, but wait 24 hours and audit the real problem. The moment you want comfort, but train the skill pressure is demanding. That is where the new man is built. Not in public, not in applause, not in the fantasy of one day. In the private refusal to let pressure turn you back into the weakest version of yourself. If you are the man who understands this, stop treating free motivation as progress. You already know pressure is not your real enemy. Your real problem is that your system is still weaker than your emotions in the moments that matter. If you keep waiting until life becomes easier before you become disciplined, you will stay affordable, replaceable, and easy to corner. Inside Patreon, I give deeper, unfiltered training on self-command, leverage, power, masculine discipline, and the psychology of becoming undeniable so you can build a private operating system strong enough to survive pressure. This is not for spectators. It is for men who are done being controlled by fear, shame, scarcity, and approval. The decision is yours. Self-command is the rich mindset when pressure tries to drag you back into your weakest identity. Not because calm makes life easy, but because calm keeps your hands away from the moves that make life harder. The emotional purchase, the bad deal, the premature exit, the desperate explanation, the argument that solves nothing, the approval chase that returns you to dependence. The man who survives pressure is not the man with no fear. It is the man whose fear no longer gets voting power. And once fear no longer gets voting power, you become harder to manipulate, harder to price cheaply, harder to shame, harder to rush, harder to distract, and harder to reduce back into the man you used to be. That is when pressure stops being proof that you are losing. It becomes proof that you are being trained. But understand this clearly. Controlling pressure is only the first battlefield. The next is harder. Building proof when nobody supports you, nobody rewards you, nobody understands the cost, and nobody is coming to confirm that you are becoming dangerous. No support, no permission, no emotional rescue. Govern yourself first, then build until disbelief becomes expensive.